Hello and welcome to Comic Boom, the Comics and Education podcast. If you're interested in hearing more about the crossover between comics and education, then this is the podcast for you. My name is Lucy Starbuck Braidley, and each week I'll be joined by a fellow educator, an academic, a librarian, or a creator of comics to discuss their journey into comics and provide some inspiration to influence your practice, and hopefully shine some light on some titles you can bring into your libraries, classrooms, and onto your bookshelves at home too. This episode of Comic Boom is sponsored by ALCS, the Authors Licensing and Collecting Society. And today on this episode we have a brilliant pair of people giving back to the comics community, providing something for children to promote the creation of comics and the reading of comics in their community. We have Helen Jones and Hannah Miller. Hannah Lee Miller has worked for many years in children's television production, including on shows like Peppa Pig and Hey Dugee. I have to say, I did not know about the Hey Dugee thing before I interviewed her, in which case we would have spoken about Hey Dugee, because I love Hey Dugee. She is also an artist who creates her own comics and has organised multiple events, including comic fairs. Hannah brings with her a large amount of knowledge, contacts and experience in small press comics, from making to selling and networking. And Helen Jones, you may remember, has been on the podcast before. I will link to her previous episode in the show notes. Helen is a lecturer in primary education at UCL, the Institute of Education, very prestigious, and a PhD candidate at Goldsmiths. And we talk about her PhD work in detail in the previous episode and her journey into comics and how she became interested in the application in education. So that's definitely worth a listen if you haven't listened to it yet. Alongside Lucy Starbuck Braidley, that's me. She's written a book soon to be published about comics in the classroom. Really, really excited about that collaboration. Absolutely loved working with Helen on that book. And we talk about it a little bit at the end of this podcast, and I'm sure I'll come back to it again in the future. It was a real labour of love, and I'm very proud of it. Helen edited the book Children's Literature in Action and has published her work academically, and she's a co-director with Hannah Miller of Yo Comics, which is a comics fair for and by young people. It's a brilliant initiative. It's run in South Norwood in South London. We are going to be talking all about Yo Comics today. It's coming up soon, but really the point of the episode is what can we do to promote more of these kinds of comics fairs for children and young people to start happening around the country, where we can learn from people who are doing it. And that's why Hannah and Helen are on the podcast today to talk about how they came about running Yo Comics, some of the things that they've learned. They did it last year. This is the second year coming up. And I found it just an absolutely fascinating conversation and so much to learn, so inspiring. There are some moments in this episode where some of the sound quality slightly dips out. I have kept some of those elements in. You can still hear, it's very easy to make out what's being said, and the value of what's being talked about is so important. So be aware that there are a few dips in sound quality, but you should still be able to enjoy this episode all the same. Here's what Hannah and Helen have to say. Hello, Hannah and Helen. Welcome to Comic Boom.
Hello.
Welcome to the podcast. It is great to have you here. We've got an interesting combo of one returning guest and one brand new person to talk to. So we're going to start with our fresh meat. Hannah, can you tell us a little bit about your sort of personal journey into comics? Were they something you got into as a child? Was it more as an adult? Tell us a bit about your reading journey.
So I was very lucky to have parents who loved comics, mainly the sort of strips, the Charlie Brown, Snoopy, Garfield, Pogo Possum, which is a little less known in the UK.
I never heard of Pogo Possum.
So it's just brilliant. And it was the meme of the household. We were referred to as Tads, which is short for tadpoles, which is in Pogo as well. And there was Asterix, Tintin. I think a lot of families had these, but my dad invested the enthusiasm and I just carried on the journey. So, and we all had the Beano. I had the Beano, my brother had the Dandy, my sister had Bunty, Mandy, and all the other girl ones. And we'd get Commando, the little mini comics that you used to get when you're going to the seaside. And we'd get a little, and there was Commando, and you'd get mini Beanos and mini. So it was definitely something that was part of life at home. And I'm just outraged that not everyone has this. and it isn't in everybody's life.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. It sounds like it's a really part of your like family culture.
Oh, very much.
Was it part of your school life as well? Thinking about the audience being educators here, I'm always interested to know whether it felt very separate.
There was things that did cross over. So things like Garfield, you would find other kids at school that liked Garfield, but they wouldn't know. They might know Tintin, or I don't think it ever came across in primary school, and definitely not in secondary school. Completely vanished, and I spent the rest probably from secondary school onwards searching for other people who liked comics, which was hard, and it was usually boys as well. I'd find boys, and I went to an all-girls school, so there was I couldn't find comic fans.
Thin on the ground there, boys.
Yeah, and so when I hung out with boys, I remember one guy's house just had a shelf full, wall to wall, of books of 2000 AD, and I just ignore everyone. I'd sit down, grab one of them, whatever else. I was early teen then, and I was just devour them. But yeah, not at school.
And I think when you're like adults that are involved in comics and interested in comics, you surround yourself with lots of other adults. But actually, it's not a mainstream thing, really, for adults to be, especially not women, I don't think, to be really engaged with comics. Again, it's easy to think that they are because I know so many women who are involved in comics. But in terms of something being in the mainstream, it's really not, I don't think, at the moment, part of typical adult reading culture. Why do you think you've maintained that through to adulthood? What was the secret of keeping that in your life, do you think?
I think there was a bit of a culture thing there. Like, I identified with the sort of subculture element, and so that intrigued me. There was definitely, I remember bridging the gap between children comics, children friendly, all age comics, to things that are really not for kids. I remember I started collecting Furry Freak Brothers. That was my first, I'm going to intentionally collect my own. And it was the way I would cope with comic shops, which were very male and very uncomfortable. I would be like, I'm here to get the next issue of Furry Freak Brothers. And it helped me like just zone out everybody that made me feel uncomfortable there. I remember there were some tween-age comics out there, like Zit. They were like Viz's child-friendly versions. It
is a weird jump, isn't it? I think it's still quite a difficult thing to support people once they've aged out of something that they were reading. It's not always simple to find them something new. I've definitely reverted back as an adult to all-age comics. I realised that though the adult comics can sometimes be a little uncomfortable, and go into quite dark materials, when actually what I want is escapism and relaxation. So all ages comics, they're just joyful, pretty much, even if they're sad. And so that gives us a little bit of a clue, but how are comics in the broadest sense, how are they part of your life now? They fill my shelves. Like 3 bookshelves full of comics and graphic novels from my interests, but I try to make my own. I don't think I'm ever as good as I'd like to be, and I've done tabling and sold my mini comics, and now I try and arrange comic fairs just because I think they need to happen. They have to happen, and they don't seem to be happening in London at the minute, so they have to. But so it's very present in my life. It's my jam. Amazing. Helen, we're going to move on to you for a minute. Anyone interested in hearing about your early start as a comics reader, all of that sort of stuff, can go back to your previous episode, which I will link in the show notes. I hope that makes you feel fancy. So we're going to ask you a slightly different question, which is just a little bit of an update since we've last had you on the podcast. It's been a while. Is there anything you've been adding to your reading diet? What can you share with us that's been interesting you lately?
Yeah, I mean, you said, what have I been adding since I last was on the podcast? And it's loads. So I can't talk to you about it for an hour.
Yeah, don't list it all. No, just some highlights, please.
So I think I've been really, I really like the middle grade, young adults, comics, graphic novels, and particularly ones I've been reading recently. So Jen Wang, Ash's Cabin, which is just a really lovely story, sort of coming of age story, and about sort of discovering yourself and running into the mountains to do so. And also How It All Ends by Emma Hunsinger, which again is sort of coming of age teenage story, sort of about both of them about finding your identity really in your teenage years. But what I love both about them is actually they're quite sort of experimental in their comics form.
Oh, I love that.
How it all ends. It's got absolutely no panels in it at all. And I often take it along to when I'm doing sessions about comics with students and sort of talking about what defines a comic. And people look at that one and they're like, well, wait a minute, there's no panels. So this can't be a comic or it can't be a novel. But it is. It's marketed as and sold as one. So I think it's just really interesting the way it plays around with the art form. And I think I've been interested in that quite a lot as well. So looking at sort of where comics are doing unusual or interesting things. So going along to comics fairs, for example, you might pick up sort of comics or zines being self-published. It can be comics form. It can be more like a book. They can range across different ways. And some of the ones I've been really interested in are ones from Colossi Press.
Yeah, they're so cool.
Who are local to us in Croydon, or Penge, I should say for them. But they have
Penge
ones.
is a good word.
Penge is a lovely. Apparently the most trendy place to live now in London.
Not surprised. Sounds good.
But they produce some really lovely ones called Colossal Cartographies, which sort of open up and you unfold them and you can play around them.
Yeah, they're so cool.
Then also, I think some of the work by Lucy Stewart. So she publishes both for children and for adults. But some of her work for adults, so for example, Walking Distance by her, I would say, again, it sort of plays around with the genre. Is it a comic? Is it a picture book? I would call it a picture book for adults in a way, but it's really fascinating the way she sort of combines different art forms again within it, and prose and the comic art form as well.
Can you tell us about Yo Comics? A little bit of a potted history. When did it start? What is it? And what can people find there if they come along?
So we did it for the first time last year. Yo Comics, it's a comic fair by kids and for kids. And it's a mixture. We have a mixture of tables. So when I say tables, it's like a market. Table is so a mixture of professionals who make comics for kids and kids who make comics and kids groups that make comics, and also a few charities and schools. And we also have workshops and a little quiet library room.
I ran that last year and I loved that little library.
You did. Smashed it out the park in a very quiet.
It's very easy to do. I basically just sat in the corner and read comics all day, and everyone else wanted to do that too.
Yeah, it's sort of came about, I guess, it started its life in probably at the beginning of 2024, didn't it, Hannah? So I think both me and Hannah sort of had these ideas in our heads, and I'd previously been running comic fairs just in a school with children at a comic club that I had part of my PhD research. But the key thing about that was having comics fairs at the end of the comics making process. So the children really felt like publishers and they could share their work with others. They made some money out of it, which then went back into the comic club to buy resources for the following year. So it also made the comics club sustainable. So I had been doing that, and Hannah had been running sort of comic fairs for a sort of adult or all ages audience. But we both really thought there was really something missing in terms of having something specifically aimed at children and young people. And particularly at the moment when comics have been, and graphic novels have been really taking on in terms of the Phoenix, the Beano is still incredibly popular, but children really, really engaging with comics as a form. And that we felt that they needed something, a space for children to sort of, for that to be celebrated, to make it exciting, and to have adult creators there. Sometimes the children's heroes that they wanted to meet, but also having children alongside them, being able to sell and share their own comics was something that we felt was really needed. And we wanted to create that space for it. So yes, it started off with an idea in 2024 and then came into reality in 2025.
I mean, that's not bad turnaround for an idea, is it? Straight away, got it going.
Yeah, we had the logistics sorted, and then it was just a case of piecing it all together. I think for me it was important that a kids fair needed to exist because of my experience tabling at other fairs where you would see parents and children and come interested, wanting to engage, and I'd see them reach for a book and I'd be like, don't read that, that's not suitable for kids.
Yeah.
It just didn't seem to be a space where you could say this, anything and everything is safe for a kid to read. And I believe in the freedom of comics and zines to be able to express what they want and talk and create about lots of topics and dark issues and dark comedy and whatever they need to. But we also need to make sure that younger people don't stumble upon, and I say stumble upon things that will upset and disturb them. And I say this because it's happened to me, because in my pleasure and enjoyment of comics, I've definitely come across things that have made me uncomfortable and spooked, freaked out in an unsettling way at an age I couldn't process it. And so I just feel that to me it was just very important to make a space that was completely safe for kids, where it was all accessible and fun, and so you could just share the love of comics without causing a problem.
I love that. And aside from the content of the comics available, one of the things that struck me when you were talking at the start, Hannah, was that you were saying you were reflecting on times when you within a space hadn't felt welcome or comfortable. And how do you approach making comics on the day and a kind of an accessible and inclusive space where young people feel a sense of ownership or belonging there? How do you approach that? It's not always easy to do for adults to do that.
I will say the volunteers make it happen. I think we've got some very welcoming and positive and happy and joyful people that come and help us make it happen. And then the kids come with their parents, and watching the parents' eyes light up and become like kids as well, engaging in all these things.
Yeah, I definitely observed a lot of parents in the library. A penny dropped for some of them. Like, they're sat there, they're like, well, all right, my kid's reading now. What am I going to do? Oh, I'll just pick this up, and then be like, oh, this is why you read it. Oh, this is actually really funny. Oh, this has got a great story. And just actually seeing some of them engage themselves and realise that there's some really good quality and worthwhile stuff out there to read. It was great. A bit of magic happening.
Well, I think that's part of it too, is creating all those different spaces. So that's something we thought really carefully about, was that we know sort of comic fairs can be quite sort of busy and noisy places. And we wanted bits of it to be busy and noisy. The Megaphone Comics, though, where there was lots of making and creating going on. We had the workshops, which again are very buzzy, lots of involvement. But then with having the reading room as well as that sort of quiet space to go and sit in, and those bean bags and you can relax. So there was something for everybody in terms of sort of what they wanted to go to as well within the comics fair.
That's great. And it was a huge success. Was it as popular as you were expecting? More popular? Were you like, they're coming? What was that like?
I think it was quite terrifying, wasn't it, Hannah, doing it for the first time? Because you're like, right, we're going to do a comics fair for children. And we're like, will anybody come? Who's going to come to it? And I think the one thing last year we have our Instagram page, and we put our workshop tickets on the Instagram page, and all the workshops went within about sort of 10, 15 minutes. So at which point we kind of had an idea that, yes, it's going to be
popular. Yeah.
Some people are going to be coming. We've got rid of all the tickets to the workshops had gone. And I think then on the day, it was just lovely, wasn't it? Because people came, people stayed for an hour. Some people stayed almost the whole day. But it was just amazing to see all the people and the parents and people coming and engaging with it. And hopefully as well, sort of reaching out the whole community. So it's based in South London, but reaching out to the whole sort of community around. But we also had people coming from much further afield, South London.
We had someone come all the way from Dublin.
What?
Specifically for the fair. And I was pleased that they actually, we had a little raffle because we had some really lovely signed posters designed by Tor Freeman.
Yeah, the artwork's great.
She's amazing. And signed by all the people that were all the tablers and stuff. So we had these 3 little raffles. And the woman that came all the way from Dublin won one of those, which was, excellent. I just thought, yeah.
That's as it should be.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Helen, I wanted to ask you a little bit more. You mentioned your PhD research and having done some different format comics fairs with children in the past. And I'm just wondering how that research built into this. were you able to draw things from that where you think like this is something that we definitely need to include based on your research?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, as I was saying, that I ran a comics fair 6 years on and off in a primary school, and it was part of the comics club that I ran there, and the children always worked together to create comics collaboratively and then sell those at the end of the comics club period at a comics fair. And we sort of invited, the other children in the school. We invited their family to come along. And it was just a really lovely way of celebrating what they'd achieved. And one of the things I noticed was just actually how important this comics fair was for the children in comics club. And we could have just reached the club and there's your comic, you can take it home. But actually that celebration of being able to share your work and sell your work and seeing your work being valued. I mean, we only ever sold for probably just over the printing costs as it was, but seeing their work valued in that way was so important for them. And, somebody saying, I felt like a professional comic maker from doing the fair. My favourite part was being able to share my work with other people. Just these lovely other
so important.
It's so important, and it creates that sort of network. So, you have the children coming the following year to Comic Club who'd been the audience last year. So it sort of creates that network of children writing for each other, creating and drawing for each other, which I think is so important. I always remember as a child loving reading and seeing things that other children had produced, but children being able to publish their own work is so rare. So that's something that has come out to do my own research, and that's something I could see it could be on a bigger scale. I was sort of like, well, we're doing this fair in the playground. This could be happening somewhere else. And there was also a lovely project that happened for several years called Comic Swap, which was run out of 7 Stories in Newcastle. The idea of Comic Swap was it's different comic clubs were swapping their comics with each other, and my comics club were involved one year. And we ended up getting these comics from all over the country, and in fact, a comic from America that we made by other children. And again, I just love looking at them and seeing what other people have produced. So that's why, I feel that creating these spaces where children can sort of work collaboratively together to create comics and then go and swap their comics with others or sell their comics. So there's being seen as valued as well is really important.
And what's the mechanism? How can children get involved? Can they just turn up with some comics they've made? How does it work on the day?
It's always an organic beast, isn't it, Hannah, how people can be involved?
Well, we've just done it once so far. this year we're very excited. So we have 13. So we did a kids applied to table, which we didn't do last time, but we did this time. And we have 13 individual or little collectives of kids who with their parent are going to come and share their work.
So excited.
They were showing us some of the work and I was just giddy. I was like, this is why we do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, their little self-portraits, just amazing.
We've touched a little bit on in terms of things that were successful and things that you want to definitely bring back. Hannah, do you want to start us off?
I was just thinking we have some new people doing the workshops this year. We got some really fun things happening. My favourite part is watching the adults get giddy with their kids. So I'm looking forward to, when you see these family groups come and you see the adult get engaged as much as the kids, that's the win. I think the thing with fairs like this is at the moment we are continuing the legacy by doing it again, building the profile a bit. It's like doing it once is not enough.
Yeah.
Probably you need to do it about 3 times before you've really nailed it.
Yeah.
And then you can grow on, then you can build on it.
Yeah.
At the moment it's like, okay, let's do that. We've done it once and it was a success. Let's do it again and see if we can do it as well. Do you know what I mean? So I think at the minute it's like, let's just make it happen again so it becomes more and more ingrained and becomes a fixture.
Yeah. And you want people to be looking forward to it at the same time next year, kind of thinking,
and who knows what will come from it. Yeah. I'm hoping that there'll be more comics groups for young people happening locally. I'm hoping that more kids are going to go, oh, I can do that because they did it.
Yeah.
That 7-year-old, I'm 7, and they'd have a table. That 14-year-old, it's that sort of representation that I'm hoping is contagious for storytelling and creativity for the kids so that they can find their voice in that field. So yeah, this is like, okay, we did it once, let's keep doing it and get it in kids' heads. Like, making comics is a cool thing.
It gives them something to work towards, and something like, in the same way that at the end of the comics club, that Helen was running, but if you're not lucky to be part of that at your school, which, let's face it, most people aren't, it gives you something on your horizon where you can think, oh yeah, I could just do something for that, give you a little kick.
And I also hope that other kids' comic fairs will bloom.
Yeah.
Like, people will think this is a thing. Like, the Phoenix are doing a kids' comic fair again. I think that's great. I think we need more of them.
Yeah.
It's a really wonderful thing for kids. So
I think one of the things that me and Hannah are really mindful of when we're, thinking about the event is trying to make it as inclusive as possible. And I think sort of going back to thinking about, Hannah talking about those very male spaces of comics shops in the sort of 80s and 90s. And I think that's something I really experienced as well and talked about when I was on the podcast last. We don't want it to be that experience for everybody. So we're always thinking in terms of representation, who we've got there, about, making sure it's very diverse as much as possible and just making it an inclusive space. And that's something we worked on last year. We've worked, I think, probably even harder on doing this year as well. But yeah, I think otherwise we've tried to keep most of it the same as last year, because as you said, it was a success last year, and as children grow up, they'll engage in different things at different points when they come to the fair. They were too young for workshops last year. They might be old enough for workshops now. So actually keeping it the same, but the children having different experiences as they come along to it is also important.
And are you aiming it more towards primary children? What's your approach to thinking about the content?
I think our age range we've always focused on is the 7 to 14 years old, and particularly thinking about activities as well. I think sometimes that's an age range where perhaps there's, events, there's less of them, particularly for sort of our older sort of group 10 to 14. There isn't much going on unless you pay a huge amount of money to go to a sort of paid for activity or club. So actually creating something free for that age range was that we felt was important as well to do. Making
this free and affordable was incredibly important. We live in a pretty poor borough and, the economy is terrible. If we can do it and make it for free, then it's absolutely paramount that it has to be accessible for all pockets.
Yeah. And so it's probably worth pointing out that you're not planning on becoming millionaires from this activity.
Oh, and they laughed and laughed. No.
So what it needs to do from that perspective is cover its costs, I guess, from your side. And that's something for people to think about if they're thinking of doing their own thing.
So we're definitely not for profit at all. There is no profit made by me and Hannah, and anything that would be profit would go back into running the fair again. We've been very lucky. So where we hold the event, they've been very sort of generous in the discount they've given us for the space. This year we have to pay a bit more than we did. So we've tried to go for funding as well from different places, but we've not been successful yet in getting funding. So we have to be really careful with how we manage the money side of it all.
I'm hoping that people listening to this, we have public librarians, we have teachers, we have people running youth clubs who might be thinking, this is a good idea. This is something we could do in our community. What were the key kind of pointers the tips, the things you wish you'd known or thought about before? There must have been a big learning curve, that process of setting up the first one. What kind of tips would you share? Hannah, we'll start with you.
What I would say to anyone interested in doing it is go and volunteer with someone already doing it, because that's how I learned.
That's such a good idea.
And you will then meet people like I have who are willing to spare their time, volunteer on your project. So you create a network of helpers who are passionate and interested in comics. So, I do think sometimes there's a tendency for people to say, oh, I can do this on my own. It's like, you don't have to. Just ask people. You'll find people who value this enough to do it, to volunteer. But I think the key thing on a logistical place is find the space, find the building, and make sure it has tables. But sometimes people find the building and then they have to hire the table, and then that's an extra cost.
Yeah.
So, I think if you have the passion, find the building, then find the people, then go from there.
Yeah, that's great. Helen, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I think just really be aware of all the sort of nitty-gritty aspects of the logistics, things like getting public liability, in place and various things like that, which Hannah has been great at doing, and just sort of having an overview of all of the things you need to think about in a very practical sense. You can sort of have this idea, it'd be lovely, or just invite all these children along. And then you have to start thinking about it logistically, again, safeguarding. So if you're working building, make sure there's safeguarding policy. And again, something we just think really carefully about in terms of making sure we had somebody on the doors. So, you had an idea of who was coming in and out of the building at all times. Social media as well. I think about how you're going to publicise and get your fair out there and known about. So we started off last year with Instagram. We've got the fantastic Lauren who does our social media for us. So again, it's finding people with those skills that will help you. I think me and Hannah were just like, I don't know what to do. I'll just do it on Instagram. But Lauren's been really sort of brilliant at sort of bringing strategy to it. And we're going to roll it out here. And we're going to have this event. And this year, alongside having the Instagram, we've now got just a web page, which can be a landing place for people to come and sort of find links from there as well. So just sort of trying to create a space, but also going back. It doesn't have to be social media. So it can be going back to simple things like getting flyers made and handing out flyers. There've been really successful ways, again, of sort of just advertising the event.
Yeah, we learned about press packs. Again, that was, Lauren gave us some good steers on that. Yeah, reaching out to local news outlets to put the word out. As long as you've put together a strong press pack, they're grateful to have an article, depending on which one. But, it was quite an interesting learning element. And that's the thing about finding people to work with when you want to do things like this. Helen and I have definitely different skill sets and they complement each other. Neither of us had the social media. We got Lauren complement, and cover bases. So, Helen's got this huge educational background and knowledge that, has definitely alleviated so many things I would not have done as well. So we all have our own skill sets and recognising that and leaning into that just makes the life a lot easier.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Anything to add, Helen?
I mean, I was just going to say, create that team. That team is really important, of having people to work together with on this. And that link certainly goes out then to your volunteers and people who are involved. And I think the other thing as well is don't lose faith. If something goes wrong or isn't quite right, or you have to adapt and change, just have other plans in place if something doesn't work. So again, I said, me and Hannah applied for funding this year. You have to wait a couple of months to find out if you've been successful. Then before you have to pay the whole, you find out you've not been successful. So we've had to change tack several times. But it's about working as a team and knowing how to adapt and not letting that get you down, but actually let go and find another way of doing this, which is really important too.
And I suppose at those moments as well, not being on your own is really helpful. You've got a team of people. Someone's going to be like, let's keep going. You can keep each other going when you have setbacks.
And all of us, I think, are passionate about the project, which means the project leads us.
From my own experience as someone leading a programme with children in schools in my day job, it's easy for me in that setting to capture child feedback and so on, because I'm working with the same group of children. I know where they're there. They're not coming into a space and then leaving at different times. Did you manage to capture some insights from children or young people before they wandered back out with armfuls of comics on the day? How did that kind of evaluation of it work and feed into the next version?
I think there was Jean from the halls who was asking individuals for their experience while they were there.
Great.
And Helen organised the feedback that we requested from the tablers. So we got a huge amount of information from that. I think one of the things that was very present on the day was people actively telling you, this is brilliant. Are you doing it next year? And so, because I sat on the front desk, so I'd see people leaving, and the amount of enthusiasm that would pass was like quite a buzz.
Yeah. Well, you could definitely tell on the day that everyone was absolutely loving it. That's for sure.
There were mistakes we made, though. We didn't count footfall. And I think this year we'll just need to have a clicker on the door so we are counting people going in and out.
Oh, I want that job. Always wanted to be one of them people. Yeah, and that would have also, presumably, that would have been useful insight to have for funding applications and so on.
I think you could. I would say we probably had 500 plus people on the day. You could. I've done fairs there before, and it was just full all the time, and a flow of people coming and going.
Yeah,
all day. It wasn't too crowded, which was also nice. It wasn't like uncomfortably.
No,
full.
it wasn't like the school Christmas fair, which was like the worst experience of my life. I hate that. It was, you could breathe and you could walk. You weren't just having to go wherever everyone else was going. It's very stressful. I hate that. Brilliant. This has been so good. I think one thing we haven't actually said yet, which I will say in the intro as well, but is where, when, how can people come? Do you want to do a little shout out for anyone listening who wants to come along on the day? Where they have to go? What time? What day is this amazing thing happening?
So it's taking place on March the 22nd, which is a Sunday, and it's happening at Stanley Arts, which is in South Norwood. So it's really well connected by public transport. There's several buses that go there. It's on the overground and train lines. Yeah, and it runs from 11 to 5 o'clock. So 11 a.m. till 5, we will be there.
Yeah, nearest train station, Norwood Junction, 15 minutes from London Bridge.
Excellent.
One stop.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. This has been really interesting. It's so exciting just to hear about it. And yeah, I can't wait to go again. I loved it last year. Helen, I've got one thing that I want to ask you about before we do our wrap-up questions, which is a bit of a cheeky question. I've heard a rumour that you've got a book coming out, which... Would you like to tell us about it? I heard you're writing it with someone really amazing.
Yeah, I'm surprised you've heard that rumour, Lucy. We've been keeping quiet. But apparently you and me have been writing a book together over the past. So yeah, it's called Comics in the Classroom. It's just gone to print and it's hopefully coming out in July this year.
In the summertime, hopefully, yeah.
And yeah, it's a book. I mean, you might want to talk about it a bit, Lucy, but I can describe it. So it's a book that really looks at how comics can be used, again, across the primary age, but into secondary school as well. So I think, again, probably the focus would be about that 7 to 40-year-old age group for it, was it looks at comics in relationship to reading pleasure, in relation to visual literacy. There's lots of different chapters, comics and drawing and writing for pleasure, which draws from some of my research. Comics and thinking, so thinking about how we can use comics as a way of thinking in the classroom. And also looking at comics across the curriculum. And then there's brilliant chapters on comics and representation and comics and inclusion, and also comics and sustainability, which I think probably aren't thought about as much as they should be.
Yeah.
It's all about how teachers can use comics in a range of different ways in the classroom. And I think it really hopefully will be a first for the UK. We've had some publications in the UK, but mainly it's just really been American publications about how to use comics in education. So I think it's something we really desperately do need in the UK.
Yeah, we were really keen, weren't we, to make sure that it's kind of rooted in, not solely, but it's talking about UK-based comic creators where possible, and examples from UK-based practice and linked to the curriculum as it is currently as well, which is really cool, I think, to have something that's got that kind of unique perspective. And I have really enjoyed writing it with you. It was really, well, not all the time. Sometimes it was a bit stressful. But it was fun and it was great to have.
Then we gave ourselves quite a short deadline. Yeah, we're going to write this book in a year. So.
Yeah, we did it though. Smashed it out the park.
And I think what's been lovely about it as well is that each chapter does have a case study. So it's not just about here are our ideas about what you could do. It's just what people are actually doing. And that's been lovely. So some people who come to Yo Comics are featured in some of the case studies. It really reflects the whole comics community across the UK.
Yeah, and there's some former guests from the podcast on there. It's been great to put all of those kind of experiences and connections together to put something that hopefully it's really useful and practical, as well as having some good insight into the research, the evidence base for some of these things that we're talking about. So yeah, watch this space. We'll talk about it more, I'm sure. So before we end the podcast, we'd just like to do a few key takeaways. Maybe we could just do one each. The one thing I want you to remember about the stuff I've been saying today on this podcast. Who wants to go first? Hannah looks like the cogs are turning.
Oh God, they're always turning. I think not to undervalue the gift of communication that comics give to kids to express themselves. Not to underestimate it and not to devalue it because they're pictures. I'm dyslexic and I was diagnosed at 26. My dad was severely dyslexic, but comics gave us so much joy. So, and I hear it all the time. It gets devalued for young people in reading. I still read books.
Yeah.
And I also read comics.
Exactly. Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you, Helen.
Yeah, I think just absolutely the importance of creating spaces for children to be able to share their own work and their own creations and see their own interests valued. I don't think schools always provide that environment currently. We've got a very sort of strict curriculum. English teaching, if you want to speak of literacy, is often teaching children about sort of grammar forms rather than sort of how to express themselves. And I think creating spaces where children are allowed to have their voices heard is just really, really important and can't be undervalued.
Yeah, and obviously in England, our curriculum is being reviewed. Slightly disappointed to see the lack of diversity in the people that are going to be rewriting the English curriculum. Just going to put that out there. Nothing, no reflection on those particular individuals and whether or not they're qualified, but I do think that we need a wide range of voices and experiences informing our curriculum, and that's how we get rich outcomes and success for children who have also lots of wide varieties of lived experience. So, yeah.
Yeah, and no discussion either of this new curriculum of multimodality and the way people are reading nowadays across different platforms, which again is a shame. It feels like a slightly old-fashioned curriculum if it misses that out.
Yeah, I think even just our approach to like quite siloed subject areas just limits that multimodality, as you say. And I don't have huge hope that it's going to be changed in this curriculum review.
Although on a cheerful note, create those spaces, but also go back to the idea of fun. Keep it fun. Making comics is fun. Swapping comics is fun. Sharing and bringing a community together is fun, is exciting, is playful, and and keep it that way as well. It should be enjoyable.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important for these other spaces outside of the curriculum to exist, for people to be creative and express themselves and tell their stories and have a bit of fun. So it is amazing that you guys are doing that. Final thing is, if we were to add one comic or book, graphic novel or book about comics to our to be read piles tomorrow, what should we add?
Thank you for asking. I'd like to share my absolute favourite comic that I have read multiple times is Spiral Bound by Aaron Reiner. It's anamorphic, so it's all animal characters, but it's about this little elephant making friends. It sounds much more cutesy because it's actually an adventure and a mystery. I just love it. It's just such wonderful storytelling. It has such lovely nuances of friendship and it's so welcoming and warm, and it also has this mystery that's actually delightful. He's written a couple of other books, and he just needs to write more.
Brilliant. Helen?
I'm going to be very cheeky, Lucy, and suggest people put on their to be read pile for the future comics in the classroom.
Now, I don't normally allow that, but seeing as it's our book, yes, you definitely should.
Yes.
Clear the whole back half of 2026 to be reading that book on over and over again.
To read and digest it all.
Yeah. Brilliant. I'm going to suggest something just really funny that just made me laugh so hard. I can't remember who it's by, so I'm going to have to search it up. Is Detective Beans. Detective Beans is little, and the Case of the Missing Hat. Lee Chen is who it's by, and it is just this little cat child. It wants to be a detective, and just really had me howling. And also the second one, the second Detective Beans, is also very, very funny. We're just very witty. Enjoyed it. Wasn't expecting it to be that funny, and it's great. I really enjoyed it. I read it on the train on the way back from a conference that I went to, and was just sat there laughing to myself on the train. It's very good. But thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. It's been great to have you. I've really enjoyed hearing about some things that go on in the background to create a really successful event, because I had just the pleasure of just turning up on the day and enjoying it with my box of comics last year. So yeah, it's been great to hear about all the thought and development that goes into it. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
There we go. Great guests. Thanks so much to Hannah and to Helen for giving us their time and for sharing all of their experience on running a comics fair for and by children. Yo Comics is coming up. If you're listening to this as the episode comes out, it's coming up, and hopefully will become a fixture in the calendar this time of year every year. Second year now, so they're really establishing themselves. Thanks to ALCS for sponsoring today's episode. As you know, we often have writers on Comic Boom speaking about their work, and ALCS is a not-for-profit organisation supporting its 120,000 plus members to collect money for all of the secondary uses of their work. That means things like photocopies, digital reproductions, and even the use of texts in education. And they also produce some fantastic resources to support educators to explore topics like copyright and plagiarism in the classroom. You can check those out on the link in the show notes. There's a range of different free resources available for teachers, and especially I think in the age of AI is something that we need to build children and young people's awareness of. And there's some really interesting dedicated resources on that topic as well. My book recommendation for the week, I was thinking about one of the things that I started reading since our last set of episodes is a manga, Delicious in Dungeon. It's a meshi manga. It's a manga about food. It's also an anime on Netflix if you want to watch it. It's very funny about some people that are going into a dungeon and they learn to eat the dungeon creatures to sustain themselves. So it's kind of part cooking show, part adventure story, battling creatures in the dungeon, and it's very funny. So definitely recommend Delicious in Dungeon by Ryoku Kui, who is a female manga creator. Very witty, brilliant drawings, great pace, and I really enjoyed it. It's 14 volumes. I always trust the age rating on the back of manga because the story really can develop and change over the course of the series and bring in content maybe less suitable. So the back age rating is for older teens and adults, and I trust that. Thanks so much for listening today. Hopefully that's planted some seeds of things that you would like to do, and maybe in your school, in your library, in your community, to promote comics with children and young people. There's such a buzz about comics. I think it's just brilliant to be able to harness that and give young people a platform through which they can realise their creative dreams. So thank you for listening today. We'll be back with another episode next week. You've been listening to Comic Boom, which is produced by me, Lucy Starbuck Braidley. Thanks for listening.